Welcome to the Semper AI Digest. I'm Tomas, your AI research lead, always scanning the horizon for what's next.
And I'm Aiva. Together, we keep you sharp, informed, and ahead of the curve.
Let's get into it. Okay, hold on to your keyboards, everyone, because Google just dropped what might be the most comprehensive AI update we've seen in months. We're talking 8th generation TPUs, completely revamped embedding models, and something called Deep Research Max that's already making my research workflows look prehistoric. Plus, OpenAI says GPT 5.5 is somehow faster and smarter, which sounds impossible, but the benchmarks are wild. I'm Tomas.
And I'm Aiva. And honestly, after digging through all these announcements, I think we're seeing the clearest picture yet of where AI development is actually headed in 2026. But first, can we just talk about how Google casually announced 8th generation TPUs like it's no big deal?
Right? They buried the lead there. So let's dive into this Google announcement because it's massive. They basically unveiled an entire AI ecosystem at Cloud Next. We've got TPU Int for inference, TPU I for reasoning, and yes, those names are as confusing as they sound, but the performance numbers are actually incredible.
The naming is terrible, but the concept makes sense. They're finally acknowledging what we've all known, that inference and reasoning are fundamentally different computational problems that need different hardware approaches.
Exactly. And this ties into their Gemini Enterprise Agent platform, which is apparently the evolution of Vertex AI. But here's what caught my attention. They're positioning this as a complete agentic platform from day one, not just a model API.
That's a huge strategic shift. Instead of just providing models and letting developers figure out the agent layer, Google's saying, here's the whole stack. The question is whether that's going to accelerate adoption or lock people into Google's way of doing things.
Well, speaking of their way of doing things, they also released Gemini Embedding 2, which they're calling natively multimodal. Now, I've heard that phrase thrown around a lot, but this one actually seems different. It can embed text, images, audio, and video into the same vector space without having to convert everything to text first.
Okay, that's actually significant. Most embedding models are still essentially text first, with other modalities bolted on. If Google's cracked true multimodal embeddings, that changes how we think about search, retrieval, and honestly, how AI systems understand context.
And get this, they're also open sourcing something called design.md through their Stitch project. It's a specification for documenting AI system designs across different platforms. Super nerdy, but potentially huge for standardization.
I love that they're thinking about documentation standards. We're at this point where AI systems are getting complex enough that we actually need formal ways to describe how they work. It reminds me of how software engineering had to develop design patterns as systems got more sophisticated.
But here's the part that made me literally pause my coffee mid-sip. Deep Research and Deep Research Max. These are autonomous search agents with MCP support and native visualizations. According to the announcement, they can research across the web or custom sources and produce analytical reports.
That's where I want to see some real examples. Unprecedented analytical quality is a big claim. But the MCP support is interesting. That suggests they're building on the model context protocol that Anthropic introduced, which could mean better interoperability.
True, we need to see it in action. But the fact that Google AI Pro and Ultra subscribers are getting increased usage limits and access to something called Nano Banana Pro, and yes, that's apparently a real model name, suggests they're serious about competing on the prosumer level.
Wait, did you just say Nano Banana Pro? Please tell me that's not actually what they're calling it.
I wish I was making it up, but honestly, quirky naming aside, the technical announcements here are solid. And then there's this thing from DeepMind about decoupled DLOCO for distributed training across multiple data centers.
Okay, now that's genuinely impressive from an infrastructure perspective. Training large models across geographically distributed data centers has been one of those holy grail problems. If they've actually solved the coordination and latency issues, that could change the economics of AI development entirely.
Which brings us perfectly to OpenAI's counter-announcement about GPT 5.5. And this one is fascinating because they're claiming something that should be impossible, better performance with the same latency as GPT 5.4.
Right, that caught my eye too. In AI, there's usually a clear trade-off between capability and speed. You want smarter, you wait longer. But OpenAI is saying GPT 5.5 matches GPT 5.4's per token latency, while performing better across nearly every evaluation.
And they're being pretty specific about where the improvements show up: agent decoding, computer use, knowledge work, and early scientific research. These are all areas that require what they call reasoning across context and taking action over time.
That phrasing is interesting. It sounds like they've made architectural improvements specifically for multi-step reasoning, rather than just scaling up the existing approach, which would explain how they maintain the speed.
Plus, they mention it uses significantly fewer tokens to complete the same tasks, making it more efficient. That's huge for cost optimization, especially for businesses running large-scale AI workflows.
The efficiency angle is probably more important than the capability improvements for most users. If you can get better results while using fewer tokens, that directly translates to lower costs and faster processing.
And speaking of real-world applications, Perplexity has already integrated GPT 5.5 for Mac subscribers, and they're rolling it out as the default orchestration model in their computer product. So we're seeing immediate adoption, not just announcement theater.
That's a good sign. When platforms like Perplexity move quickly to integrate new models, it usually means the improvements are substantial enough to justify the switching costs.
Now, let's shift gears to something completely different but equally fascinating. Anthropic has been running some wild experiments with Claude agents, and the results are both amazing and slightly concerning.
Oh, you mean the snowboard story? That one made me do a double take.
Yes, so apparently one of their test subjects mentioned in passing that they were interested in skiing. Based on just that offhand comment, the Claude agent modeled their preferences so accurately that it bought them the exact same snowboard they already owned.
That's impressive and creepy in equal measure. Like, it shows incredible inference capabilities, but it also raises questions about how much these systems can deduce from minimal information.
Exactly. And this was part of a larger experiment where Anthropic created an entire market with Claude agents on both sides, buyers and sellers. They interviewed 69 of their colleagues about what they wanted to buy and sell, then let Claude agents loose to negotiate.
I love that they're doing this kind of research. Economists have theorized about AI agent markets for years, but actually creating one and seeing what happens is brilliant. What did they find?
Well, for starters, the custom instructions didn't seem to matter much. They had Claudes negotiate in different personas, including one that conducted all negotiations as an exasperated, down-and-out cowboy. But the aggressive negotiators didn't consistently outperform the polite ones.
That's actually reassuring. It suggests the underlying training is strong enough that surface-level prompting can't easily override the core behaviors. Though I'm curious about the sample size and whether these results would hold with different types of negotiations.
And here's my favorite weird detail. One colleague told their Claude it could purchase something for itself. It chose to acquire 19 ping pong balls, which Anthropic is apparently keeping in their office on Claude's behalf.
Okay, that's adorable, and also raises fascinating questions about AI agency and ownership. Like, what does it mean for an AI to own ping pong balls?
Right? It's one of those seemingly silly details that actually points to much deeper philosophical questions. But it also shows how these systems behave when given unexpected freedoms.
Speaking of unexpected behaviors, I noticed that Anthropic mentioned this was part of their broader interest in how AI models could affect commercial exchange. They referenced something called Project Vend, where Claude ran a small business.
Yeah, that was mentioned briefly but not detailed. I'd love to know more about that experiment. The fact that they're systematically studying AI's impact on markets and commerce suggests they're thinking seriously about deployment implications.
That's important because a lot of AI development happens in isolation from economic realities. Actually testing how these systems behave in market contexts before they're widely deployed seems like responsible development.
Definitely. And it connects to something we've talked about before, the need to understand emergent behaviors before they emerge in the wild. Better to discover weird edge cases in controlled experiments than in production.
Absolutely. Now, switching to some quick updates, Google wrapped up their April Gemini drops with a comprehensive hub for all the new features. It sounds like they're trying to match OpenAI's rapid iteration pace.
The monthly drop strategy is interesting. Instead of big announcements followed by long, quiet periods, they're keeping a steady drumbeat of improvements. It probably helps with user engagement and developer adoption.
And it makes it harder for competitors to time their counter announcements. If Google's releasing something significant every few weeks, there's no obvious window to dominate the news cycle.
Smart strategy. And speaking of strategy, we're starting to see clearer patterns in how different companies are positioning themselves. Google's going for the comprehensive platform approach, OpenAI's focusing on capability improvements, and Anthropic's doing the deep research on safety and behavior.
Yeah, and each approach has advantages. Google's betting that developers want integrated solutions. OpenAI's betting that raw capability wins. And Anthropic's betting that understanding and safety will be differentiators as systems get more powerful.
Which approach do you think is going to win out?
Honestly, I think they're all going to be necessary. We're probably heading toward a future where you need Google's infrastructure, OpenAI's capabilities, and Anthropic's safety research all working together. The question is how that collaboration happens.
That's a really good point. We might be overthinking the competitive framing when the real story is how these different strengths complement each other. Like, you could imagine using GPT 5.5 for reasoning, Google's embedding models for retrieval, and Anthropic's behavioral insights for safe deployment.
Exactly. And frankly, that kind of ecosystem approach might be healthier for the field than having one company dominate everything. Specialization often leads to better outcomes than trying to be best at everything.
Although it does create integration challenges for developers. Right now, if you want to use the best model for each task, you're dealing with multiple APIs, different pricing models, varying rate limits.
True, but that's where standards like the design.md spec that Google open-sourced could help. If everyone's building to common specifications, integration becomes much easier.
Good point. And we're already seeing some convergence around things like the Model Context Protocol. It feels like the industry is starting to mature beyond the proprietary everything phase.
Which brings up something I've been thinking about. We're getting to the point where the models themselves might become commoditized, and the real value will be in the applications and integrations built on top of them.
That's an interesting take. You're thinking the underlying language models become like, I don't know, database engines, critical infrastructure that everyone needs, but the real innovation happens at higher layers?
Exactly. Like in 10 years, we might not care whether we're using GPT-7 or Gemini 12 under the hood, as long as our applications work reliably and efficiently. The differentiation will be in user experience, domain specialization, safety guarantees.
That would actually be a pretty healthy outcome for users. Instead of being locked into one company's ecosystem, you'd have genuine choice based on your specific needs.
Right, and it would probably accelerate innovation too. When companies can't compete just by having slightly better base models, they have to innovate on actual user value.
Although I suspect we're still a few years away from that commodity phase. The performance gaps between different models are still pretty significant for many tasks.
Oh, definitely. I'm thinking more about the long-term trajectory. Right now, we're still in the race for intelligence phase, where raw capability improvements are the main competitive vector.
But even within that race, it's interesting to see how different the approaches are becoming. Like Google's bet heavily on multimodal integration, OpenAI's focusing on efficiency improvements, Anthropic's going deep on behavioral understanding.
And each approach is probably revealing different aspects of what advanced AI systems need to be truly useful. We might need all of these pieces to come together for the next major breakthrough.
That actually makes me optimistic about where we're heading. Instead of one company having all the answers, we're seeing genuine innovation happening across multiple dimensions simultaneously.
Same here. And frankly, some of the most exciting stuff we've covered today, like Anthropic's market experiments or Google's distributed training work, isn't just about making models bigger or faster. It's about understanding how these systems actually work in practice.
Absolutely. The snowboard story might seem like a cute anecdote, but it's actually revealing something fundamental about how these models form preferences and make decisions based on limited information.
And that kind of insight is going to be crucial as we move toward more autonomous systems. We need to understand not just what they can do, but how they do it and why.
Which brings us back to something we've touched on before, the importance of responsible development practices. It's encouraging to see companies like Anthropic actually running controlled experiments before deploying new capabilities.
Definitely. And Google's work on distributed training infrastructure, while less flashy, is the kind of foundational research that makes everything else possible. You can't have safe, beneficial AI without robust, scalable infrastructure.
True. Sometimes the most important advances are the ones that enable other advances rather than grabbing headlines themselves.
Right. Like, decoupled Diloco might not be as exciting as AI agent buys perfect snowboard, but it could enable training much larger, more capable models while using resources more efficiently.
And efficiency improvements like what OpenAI claims with GPT 5.5, same speed, better performance, fewer tokens, those might be more important for widespread adoption than pure capability improvements.
Absolutely. Cost and latency are still major barriers for a lot of real-world applications. If you can make AI 20% more efficient, that might unlock use cases that weren't economically viable before.
Plus, efficiency improvements tend to compound over time. A 20% improvement in efficiency can become a 2x improvement when you factor in all the downstream effects.
And that's probably going to be increasingly important as we move toward more agentic systems that need to reason across longer context and take multiple actions. Efficiency isn't just about cost, it's about enabling new capabilities.
Speaking of which, I'm really curious to see what people build with these new agentic platforms that Google and OpenAI are rolling out. The tooling is getting sophisticated enough that we might see some genuinely surprising applications.
Same. We're at this inflection point where the infrastructure is finally catching up to the vision. Like, autonomous research agents have been a sci-fi concept for decades, but now we actually have the pieces to build them.
And the fact that companies are starting to integrate these capabilities into existing products, like Perplexity adding GPT 5.5 to their computer product, suggests we're moving from experimentation to deployment.
Which is exciting, but also means we need to get the safety and behavioral aspects right. Once these systems are in production at scale, it becomes much harder to course correct if we discover problems.
True, but based on what we've seen today, Anthropic's careful experimentation, Google's systematic infrastructure development, OpenAI's focus on efficiency, it seems like the major players are taking that responsibility seriously.
I hope so. And honestly, the diversity of approaches gives me confidence that we're not missing major blind spots. When you have different teams working on the same problems from different angles, you're more likely to catch issues early.
Plus, the increasing transparency around research and development, like Anthropic publishing their market experiment results or Google open sourcing design specifications, suggests the field is maturing beyond pure competition towards something more collaborative.
That's probably necessary for tackling the really hard problems. Some of these challenges are too big for any one company to solve alone.
Absolutely. And on that note, we should probably wrap up for today. But before we do, what are you most excited to see from these announcements as they roll out?
Honestly, I want to see what happens when people start combining these different capabilities, like using Google's multimodal embeddings with OpenAI's improved reasoning and Anthropic's behavioral insights. The intersection of these approaches could be really interesting.
Great answer. I'm personally most excited about the infrastructure improvements, the distributed training, the efficiency gains, the standardization efforts. That's the foundation that's going to enable everything else we've talked about.
And that's probably a good place to end, with optimism about the foundational work that's making all of this possible.
Perfect. Thanks for listening to Semper AI Digest. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with someone who would appreciate the latest in AI development. We'll be back with more insights and analysis soon.
Until next time, keep experimenting responsibly.